Charles Bronson talks about the 7 actors he respects the most. Charles Bronson was born Charles Dennis Bukinski on November 3, 1921 in Ehrenfeld, Pennsylvania. He was the 11th kid out of 15 children born to parents who came from Lithuania, and his childhood was filled with being poor, tough times, and the hard life of a coal miner's family. Growing up where coal mining happened in Pennsylvania, Bronson knew what it was like to do really hard work from when he was young, often working in the mines himself to help his family make money after his father died. These early times in his life gave him both the strong body and the serious, quiet personality that would later make him famous on movie screens. During World War II, Bronson joined the United States Army Air Forces and worked as an aerial gunner. He flew in fighting missions in the Pacific area and got medals for what he did. This time in the military not only made him tougher but also taught him discipline and how to keep going no matter what, and that stayed with him in his acting career. Like many young men back then, the war changed how he looked at life and gave him the quiet strength and powerful feeling that became what people knew him for after the war. Bronson started learning about acting, and he studied using the GI Bill at the Pasadena Playhouse in California. His rough looks, with his sharp cheekbones, intense eyes, and quiet way of acting, made him different in a movie business full of clean-cut leading men. At first, he got work in small roles, often playing bad guys, criminals, or soldiers. His early appearances in movies included tiny parts in films like House of Wax in 1953 and Apache in 1954. These small roles slowly built up his name as an actor people could count on. And pretty soon he was working regularly on TV too, showing up in popular shows like Bonanza, The Twilight Zone, and Gunsmoke. Bronson's real big break came when he began starring in action and war movies that showed off his tough, no-nonsense personality. His performances in The Magnificent Seven in 1960, where he played Bernardo O'Reilly, and The Great Escape in 1963, where he played the scared of tight spaces polished prisoner Danny the Tunnel King Valinsky, made people see him as a serious, talented actor. These roles showed he could bring feelings and quiet power to characters who didn't talk much, making audiences around the world love him. By the late 1960s and 1970 seconds, Charles Bronson had become a star known around the world, especially in Europe, where his rough, independent style really connected with people watching movies. Movies like Sergio Leone's epic Once Upon a Time in the West in 1968 made him a legend, with his role as the harmonica-playing gunslinger thought of as one of the greatest roles in movie history. His thin body, worn face, and powerful silence gave him a mysterious feeling that made him impossible to forget on screen. In America, he became most famous during the 1970s with the Death Wish movie starting in 1974. As Paul Kersey, a regular man who becomes a vigilante after his family gets attacked. Bronson connected with what people were worried about back then regarding growing crime in cities. The character became hugely popular in culture, and even though critics argued about whether the movies were right or wrong, audiences came in big numbers to watch him give out his kind of justice. During his whole career, he played the role again in several sequels, making his place solid as Hollywood's top Avenger. Besides his vigilante roles, Bronson appeared in many different kinds of films, including The Dirty Dozen in 1967, Hard Times in 1975, Mr. Majestic in 1974, and The Mechanic in 1972. Every performance had the same style of holding back, discipline, and quiet but powerful acting. Unlike many actors who used fancy talking or exaggerated movements, Bronson's power came from just being there. He could take over a scene with just a look or a tightened jaw, showing so much without saying a single word. As time went on, Bronson kept acting, though he slowly stepped away from being famous in the 1980s and 1990s. His health started getting worse, and he finally stopped acting in 1999 after being in the TV movie Family of Cops 3. Charles Bronson's personal life had 3 marriages, and each one was really important in shaping the man behind the movie legend. His first marriage was to Harriet Tendler, who he met in Philadelphia while trying to start his career as an actor after World War II. They got married in 1949, when Bronson was still trying hard to make it in Hollywood. Harriet, who later became a radio talk show host, stayed with him during those difficult early years when acting jobs were hard to find and the couple didn't have much money, while Bronson helped support his family with different small jobs along with trying to act. Their marriage gave them 2 children, and even with the problems of Bronson's career, They managed to build a life together for almost 20 years, but as Bronson's career started doing really well in the 1960s and the stress of being famous grew, their relationship had problems. After years of trying to balance his growing fame with family life, the couple decided to split up, and their marriage ended in 1967, just 1 year later. Charles Bronson started what would become the most important relationship of his life. On October 5, 1968, he married British actress Jill Ireland, who had been married before to actor David McCallum, Bronson's co-star from The Great Escape. Bronson and Ireland quickly became one of Hollywood's most loved couples, often appearing in movies together in films like The Mechanic in 1972, Breakout in 1975, and Love and Bullets in 1979. Their connection was clear both in movies and in real life, and they built a strong family. Together they had a daughter, and they also adopted another child, showing they wanted to raise a big, loving family. Their marriage lasted more than 20 years, which was unusual in Hollywood, and people saw it as an example of loyalty and love. Sadly, their marriage ended too soon when Jill Ireland died of breast cancer in 1990. Bronson, who had been deeply devoted to her throughout her sickness, was heartbroken by losing her, and friends said he never fully got over it emotionally. It wasn't until 8 years later in 1998 that Bronson got married again. His third wife was Kim Weeks, who used to work for Dove Audio, a company that made spoken word recordings. Unlike his very public marriage to Jill Ireland, his marriage to Weeks was more private, with Bronson looking for comfort and companionship later in life. Though their time together was fairly short compared to his earlier marriages, they had a close bond, and Weeks helped him through his last years as his health started getting worse. The couple stayed married until Bronson's death in 2003, ending their 5-year marriage. Charles Bronson, the tough star of so many action movies and westerns, was never a man who talked a lot. Known for his tough outside and steel-eyed look on screen, he often gave short, direct answers in interviews. But when someone asked him once about the actors he respected most in Hollywood, he opened up and shared his real thoughts. The list he gave not only showed his admiration for certain performers, but also gave people a look into the values that mattered to him: being tough, being real, and working hard at acting. The first name Bronson mentioned was Lee Marvin, who acted with him in The Dirty Dozen. Bronson said Lee was a soldier, plain and simple. He didn't just play a tough guy, he lived it. He carried the war with him, and that gave him a heaviness most actors can only wish for. When he walked into a scene, you believed him because he believed himself. Bronson respected Marvin's no-nonsense way of acting, his refusal to make things seem nicer than they were, and his raw presence that often took over the screen without even trying. Next came Steve McQueen, who Bronson had a famously competitive friendship with. Bronson explained, "Steve and I had our problems, but I respected him. He had that hunger in his eyes. He fought for every role like it was his last. He made the camera his friend, and he had that quiet intensity you can't pretend to have." Though their rivalry was well known, especially when both actors wanted the same leading man parts, Bronson admitted that McQueen's talent and charm pushed him to be better. The third actor on Bronson's list was Clint Eastwood. Bronson admired Eastwood's ability to control his own career and build a name as both an actor and a director. Clint was smart. He knew what the audience wanted before the audience did. He had patience and he had vision. He didn't waste time worrying about being liked. He just worked. And the work lasted. Bronson, who had spent years in supporting roles before becoming a star, saw in Eastwood an example of not giving up and being independent as an artist. Bronson also named James Coburn, another tough guy actor who had acted with him in The Magnificent Seven. Coburn had a style all his own. He was laid back, but underneath you could see the fire. He didn't try to steal a scene, but when he was there, you couldn't take your eyes off him. That's real talent. For Bronson, Coburn showed the kind of quiet strength he admired. Never showing off, always real. Another respected person for Bronson was Gregory Peck. Although the two men rarely worked together, Bronson had deep admiration for Peck's integrity both in movies and in real life. Gregory was dignity. Every role he carried himself with honor, even when the story was dark. He made acting look easy because he carried the truth inside him. You can't fake that. Bronson, often seen as a rough anti-hero, saw in Peck the perfect example of Hollywood's classic moral strength. He also included Kirk Douglas, who he thought of as one of the hardest working men in Hollywood. Kirk never stopped. He had a drive, a fire that burned in every picture he made. He wasn't afraid of looking rough or ugly if the role needed it. That kind of courage is rare. Most men want to be pretty on screen. Kirk wanted to be real. Bronson admired Douglas's fearlessness in playing flawed characters and his endless energy. Finally, Bronson named Robert Mitchum, a man he felt captured what screen presence was without even trying. Mitchum didn't act. He just existed. That's the hardest thing of all. Being natural, being real, letting the audience come to you instead of forcing it. He had that mystery, that edge. I respected that more than anything. For Bronson, Mitchum's casual, almost lazy style was not about not trying hard, but about being a master at it. Proof that the camera loved honesty more than being dramatic. In the end, Bronson's list of 7 actors showed his own beliefs about performing. He admired toughness, being real, quiet intensity, and most of all, being truthful. These were not men who used tricks or cared too much about looks. They carried their roles like they carried their lives, honestly, directly, without saying sorry. For an actor like Charles Bronson, who built his career on raw presence rather than words, these 7 stood as the rare few worthy of his real respect. Charles Bronson, one of Hollywood's most lasting and legendary tough guy figures, passed away on August 30, 2003 at the age of 81. His death happened at the world-famous Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, a hospital often connected with the final days of many famous people from film, television, and music. Fans around the world were sad not only about the passing of a legendary screen presence, but also the end of a time when Bronson had defined the gritty, serious action hero for generations of moviegoers. For years, people guessed about Bronson's declining health, and after his death, different sources reported that he had died from pneumonia and problems from Alzheimer's disease. However, looking closer at his official death certificate showed a somewhat different story. According to the document, those widely spread causes were not listed at all. Instead, the certificate gave a more detailed explanation. Bronson's immediate cause of death was respiratory failure, a condition that often means the body's final struggle to breathe. Behind this was the presence of metastatic lung cancer, an advanced stage of the disease where cancer spreads from the lungs to other organs and systems, making the body weaker and unable to fight. In addition, 2 other serious conditions were listed as contributing factors: chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, a progressive and weakening lung disease often connected to long-term smoking, and congestive cardiomyopathy, a form of heart failure where the heart muscle becomes weakened and enlarged, losing its ability to pump blood well. These combined illnesses paint a picture of a man who, despite his on-screen image of being indestructible, had gone through a long and difficult battle with multiple health problems in his final years. Bronson had been known for his rough lifestyle and the intensity he brought to every role, but away from the cameras, his body was clearly worn down by decades of physical strain and health struggles. His death, therefore, was not sudden, but rather the end result of a long decline that many close to him had quietly witnessed. After his passing, Charles Bronson was laid to rest far from the flashiness of Hollywood, in the peaceful and country setting of Brownsville Cemetery in West Windsor, Vermont. This location was deeply meaningful of the man himself, private, understated, and far removed from the bright lights of fame. Vermont had been a place of escape for Bronson, offering him the peace and quiet he wanted in contrast to the intensity of his professional life. The choice of this final resting place showed both his deep personal connection to the area and his lifelong preference for simplicity over spectacle.